With so much devastation affecting America at many levels, the question is, why hasn't something been done about Kinsey's dark legacy? The answers are complicated. Many brush off the continued influence of Kinsey and his disciples because they are told that things have gotten better because of them. It is often reported that sex crimes are diminishing in America, and that rape has supposedly declined by 85% since 1970. Law professor Anthony D'Amato published an essay in 2006 titled "Porn Up, Rape Down," crediting the porn industry for this so-called reduction of rape. But leading members of law enforcement strongly disagree. Denver Police Lieutenant James D. Ponzi is a Regis University professor whose research on crime statistics has been presented at Harvard University and published in police journals across the country. Ponzi was quoted in Police Beat in May of 2005. He said, "In 1998, Shannon Schreiber was raped and murdered. The lawsuit her parents filed revealed the practice of downgrading sexual crimes. Departments cooked the books to lower crime rates." Lieutenant Ponzi got emails from different departments all over the country regarding statistics being altered in their cities. Ponzi said these lower rape statistics don't reflect what is truly happening in sex-related crimes. The reason for the deception is political pressure to lower crime rates, as partly exposed by U.S. News and World Report. In April of 2000, they wrote, "Facing political heat to cut crime in the city, investigators in the New York Sex Crime Unit sat on thousands of reports of rapes and other sexual assaults." Police Captain Rich Costello stated that the way crime was solved was with an eraser. In that same year, it was also reported that the FBI conducted a limited investigation and discovered that PPD had failed to report between 13,000 and 37,000 major crimes. Lieutenant Colonel Dave Grossman is a West Point psychology professor and Pulitzer Prize nominee. He is a renowned expert in human aggression and co-author of the book, "Stop Teaching Our Kids to Kill." On crime statistics, he says, the downturn in violent crime in the U.S. in the 1990s is very deceptive. Violent crime is still about 5 times greater today per capita than it was in 1957. Grossman says the biggest factor for the lower crime rates is that we are lying about the data. One of the tactics used is to manipulate statistics in a way that gives a false impression to the public. For example, at the beginning of this film, we told you that some 58,200 children are abducted each year by non-family members. This report from the Department of Justice goes on to say that only 115 of these are stereotypical kidnappings. But they define stereotypical kidnapping to include children who are held for ransom or transported a distance of 50 or more miles. The report goes on to say that of the 58,200 children abducted, about half of the victims were sexually assaulted. While most people will be left thinking only about 115 kids, the reality is that at least 29,000 children are kidnapped and raped in America each year. The report also says that this is an underestimate. Researchers like Lieutenant James Ponzi, who we spoke with during our investigation, believe that the real number is much higher than anyone is able to document. As parents and guardians, we should consider again carefully the words of former prosecutor Ann Bremner.
And we also see in a lot of these kidnapping and death cases recently by sex offenders that your child can be lost in just an instant. So I think you have to be vigilant at all times. Be vigilant at all times.
Manipulation of truth and political pressure have continued to protect the influence of Alfred Kinsey and his followers for more than half a century. In the 1980s, the Reagan administration developed a commission to investigate the influence of pornography. the Department of Justice brought in Dr. Judith Reisman, who initially wanted to investigate Kinsey along with the images in Playboy, Penthouse, and Hustler. But just as the Reis Committee was opposed in the 1950s, so Dr. Reisman was shot down in the 1980s. She conducted her research at American University, but once she began, the university vehemently opposed any investigation into Kinsey, and she was forced to drop it.
I said, I'm not doing anything with human subjects. I'm just going to be researching his work, the things that he's already written. And they said, no, you can't do that. So academic freedom was completely eliminated because the Kinsey Institute had some kind of power structure going there that caused them to be unable to allow me to pursue a United States Department of Justice grant from our country that would have allowed me as an objective researcher to look into the Kinsey research as it stood.
The president of American University at the time was Dr. Richard Berenson, who was later exposed in a sex scandal involving a series of obscene phone calls in which Berenson claimed he had a 4-year-old girl that he kept as a sex slave down in his basement. The calls were eventually traced to his office at American University. Berenson was exposed as a pedophile.
And I spoke with a lawyer later, and it turned out, of course, he had pornography in his drawers. They cleaned out the office, got rid of the pornography, though they found out later, the lawyer did, that it had been there. And he quickly fled, ran to Johns Hopkins University, and entered there and stayed there for, I think it was 3 weeks, and got a clean bill of health from Johns Hopkins, saying that...
like psychiatric treatment?
Yes. Yes, suddenly he was okay.
But political opposition came not only from American University, but also in Washington, D.C., over the analysis of Playboy, Penthouse, and Hustler. As a result, Dr. Reisman was forced to publish her report independently. The FBI and 7-Eleven took notice, as we mentioned earlier, and that's when the soft porn giants fought back. In her book, The Powerhouse, journalist Susan B. Trento documents how Playboy and Penthouse magazines hired a Washington-based PR firm named Gray & Company to create a media blitz that would discredit Dr. Reisman and the entire Reagan Commission on pornography. She writes that dealing with Judith Reisman was not difficult. Since Reisman was without political savvy and lacked allies, she made a most appealing target for discrediting. Trento says that Gray & Company charged between $50,000 and $75,000 per month for the campaign against Dr. Reisman, and that for this particular account, much of the cost was borne by Playboy. Penthouse also provided funding. Because of the controversy, it would be a decade later before Dr. Reisman's research would be officially embraced by the Department of Justice. In a letter written by past administrator Robert Sweet, he says, while the massive affluent sex industry has employed nearly every technique in their arsenal short of violence to stop Dr. Reisman's work, they have not shown her findings to be incorrect or methodologically flawed in even the smallest detail.
Why don't you care more about the children than you do about protecting the finances of the sex industry and the sex establishment?
Yes, Judith. Right, the sex industry. Tell me about this sex industry.
Dr. Reisman has for years argued against the harmful impact of the sex industry on America's children. Many of the PhDs who teach in our universities have not only been associated with the Journal of Pedophilia, but have also served as the board members for pornographic magazines like Penthouse Forum. These are the people who have designed the programs for sex education in America. Because Kinsey chose to define the pain and suffering of abused children as orgasm, he then argued that children were sexual from birth and should be taught about having sex as soon as possible. While most who promote the programs probably don't know it, this thinking is what lies behind the idea of teaching sex education to kindergartners.
I remember him using this in his campaign against me, saying Barack Obama supports teaching sex education to kindergartners. And, which I didn't know what to tell him. But it's the right thing to do. To provide age-appropriate sex education, science-based sex education, science-based sex education in the schools.
Remember that this science-based sex education begins with the so-called scientific data gathered by Kinsey's pedophiles and recorded by him in his sex reports, something that Kinsey's followers continue to insist is relevant in teaching our children today.
The specific findings about these children are totally irrelevant to modern sex education.
Consider again this image of a teacher showing what appears to be 6- and 7-year-old girls how to use a condom. Who will this 7-year-old be using a condom with? When you consider that the PhDs who have designed these programs openly support the pedophile philosophy, we can only wonder, is sex education really intended to protect America's children, or to condition them for seduction at the hands of a child molester? Why are America's children disappearing? For those who study the influence of Alfred Kinsey, the answer becomes more than clear. The Kinsey Institute continues to lead the way in sex education and continues to be funded by the American taxpayer. Dr. Reisman believes the Institute should come under an official investigation, something she was prevented from doing during her time at the Department of Justice.
The Kinsey Institute was so frightened that the truth would come out. That time it was Reinisch, and then later it would be Bancroft, that they threatened lawsuits to everybody, and they pulled out every stop. They put the arm on everyone politically and institutionally. Their Rockefeller grants, their money, their funding from all kinds of other people would be pulled into play to stop Reisman from looking at the information that was right out there, that belongs in the hands of the American public, so that the American public can make their own decisions about whether this is true, whether I'm wrong and I should be sued or put in jail or something, fine. Or whether they're wrong and we need to have a proper investigation so that the American public knows the truth about our history and how come we're getting to where we are where we are in terms of the kinds of violence that are taking place in society and violence to children.
We are told that our founding fathers went to war so that America might be free. But how they would respond, we can only wonder, if they could see our country today and witness how we now define that original liberty for which brave men fought and died.